Hey, what's up guys? Nate here, and welcome to this Sonic Academy tutorial series. This is our beginner's guide to Cubase 13 course. Now this is a multi-series course divided into two levels. Now if you've completed level 1, you are in the right place. This level 2 series is going to expand on what we did in the first level 1 course. We're going to be working on the track as we left it before. We're going to take a look at side chaining. We're going to set up auxiliary effect sends. We're going to take a look at some advanced routing. We're going to shape our sound further with more of the plugins inside of Cubase, continue with the mix down before eventually mastering our track at the end of this series. Right, so without further ado, let's get into Cubase and get our track sorted. I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers. Right, welcome back guys. So we are jumping in where we left off with our level 1 track. We're going to take a look at some more advanced mixing techniques now. First I want to just discuss routing. We briefly touched on that in level 1 where we set up a few buses in these group channels. So we had our folder tracks and our drums bus that we have. If we look at our channels here, we'll click the edit button to open up the channel window, or have a look on the left hand side here. If you don't see the routing, you can of course set up the sections, make sure that routing is selected. Let's bring up the channel window as well. You can see at the top here that we have our percussion loop here is routed to the output is going to the drums bus. And our drums bus, if we look at the same thing here, the output is going to the stereo out. Great, that's how you follow the routing of buses. Now we're also going to be looking at auxiliary tracks or send or effects tracks in Cubase as they're called. These are similar to buses, however they return audio as well, so the audio is sent to them and then returned back after being processed. They're most often used for reverbs and such, but there's plenty of other ways that you can use them, either via direct routing as well. And this sort of routing via the sends is very much the same way that we do sidechain compression as well, albeit slightly different with the newer versions of Cubase. Let's just take a look at setting up a reverb first. If we wanted to have a reverb set up for our drums here that we could apply to various different elements, we could right click on this one. This would send automatically the entire drum mix to the reverb. We don't necessarily want to do that. We want to be able to adjust the reverb separately for each of these in here. What I'm going to do is just any one of these tracks, we're just going to right click around here and say add track, and we're going to go effect. You could also select this one, which is FX channel to selected channels. This one is going to create your FX channel and then automatically set a send from the clap channel that we have now selected, sending full wet to that reverb. We're going to do this the other way and just create the effect here for now. And I've got Revelation selected here. It's the built-in reverb in Cubase 13. Click add track. Right, so Revelation has popped up for us. You may be wondering what's happened to our actual effects track though. If you come down, you'll see it's in this effects channels. By default, it's put down there. We don't have to leave it there. We can move it right out. And since this is going to be one that is being set up just for the drums, I would actually prefer to have that over here so that we can see what we're doing. It's still an FX track. It doesn't have to be in this folder. This is purely just a automatic folder that gets created when you add an FX track. Let's close that down for now. I'm going to solo this entire section of drums here. Let's play back a section here. So it's completely dry right now. So let's dive in and start sending some of these signals to the reverb that we have here. We haven't set the reverb up yet. We'll do that in just a sec. Let's, for instance, we'll take a look at this shaker, I think. So just the shaker, and we'll open up the channel window once again. Again, you can do it from the side too. We're interested in these sends here. So to route audio around to auxiliary channels, we're going to be using sends. So we're going to click here and we're going to go to FX01 Revelation. This will be whatever you name this. Just call this drum reverb if you want. And we come back to our shaker. You'll see it has been renamed. So it's been routed to that one now. It's currently not enabled. We need to turn that on. So now the send is on, and let's listen to what the shaker sounds like now. And there we go. You see now when I soloed that, because the send is active, it automatically soloed the drum reverb as well, and the group channel which this one is being sent to, so that you'll always hear the soloed track. Right, so we play that back now, and we have reverb applied. So we can adjust this, send more signal to it. We can have less. There's a couple of other controls here that you should be aware of too. If you click this one, you'll have the option to reselect different sends. You can actually add in more here. You can also pan your sends left and right. So we could send just the left signal of a given channel to a reverb, which may be a stereo channel, for example. The other thing that we have here is the post fader send. Now this is important as well. What this is the signal that is being sent to the reverb is derived from whatever's coming out after the fader, so post fader, which means that if I adjusted my fader, if we played this back, let's send maximum wet to the reverb. Take a listen to what happens to the signal now when I pull this down. So both the shaker and the reverb are reducing in volume. If I set this to pre, what happens now is that we actually send the signal, if you consider that the signal comes through here, goes through here, and then into this, and then through the fader. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to bypass the fader entirely. We're going to send the signal from here. Whatever's happening here with the EQ, it's going to go from there without getting the fader, and it's going to be sent there. That means that the only way that you could turn the volume down is by actually inserting a plugin, which would turn the volume down. If we do this now, you can hear we're getting rid of the dry signal, because the dry signal is controlled by this fader, but the reverb is still there, so we're getting just the tail of the reverb by itself. You hear that? Just reverb. Bring that back. We've got the dry signal being mixed in again. So that is pre and post fader sends. Let's dial in the settings of the reverb, a quick little way to get to the reverb now. Without having to go out of this and go and select the reverb, you can just right click on this one and say Edit Effect Revelation. We want something nice and short, I think, for this. Let's just see if we can find a preset in here. We'll look for something drum or a room. Let's check out our live stage. Let's studio room. We'll go with the studio room here, for example. Let's go studio room natural. There we go, that's pretty nice. Now we don't want too much reverb on this, so let's just dial this back slightly. And that's providing a nice bit of ambience for that shaker for us. We can continue to do this with the other ones as well. If you're going to apply reverb to all of these, of course, what we can do is bring up the mixer page. Let's select all our drum parts. And let's bring down our sends. Now we don't have them enabled here right now, so let's again come over to this page and enable sends. And we can, on all of these, select the drum reverb whilst holding down Shift and Alt. And there we go. Shift and Alt again. Open these up. We'll do all of them post fader. And let's solo some of these and hear what we've got. Maybe a little bit more on the loop that we have. Now you don't have to have just one effect, you don't have to have just the reverb there. A good idea would be to EQ this as well. We can EQ that with the pre's as well. Maybe if you wanted to do this post, we could just bring in an EQ in the channel strip. Just use the studio EQ here. And we could cut out the lows of the reverb, for example. Or adjust the tone of the reverb. Right, so there we go. Now, there's also a reason why I moved this drum verb in here, aside from just having it around so that it's close to editing and such. Because this is a drum reverb, and I wanted to be able to use the reverb with different drum sounds within our group bus. I don't necessarily want to use this with everything in the track. Also, when I'm exporting stems, you will need to export the reverbs as well, additionally, because they actually are going to a different place. Currently, as it is right now, if you open this one up, you can see that this is going to the stereo out. So if we were to render the output of the drums bus, we wouldn't actually be getting the reverb because that's going to a separate output. So what I like to do with reverbs like this, when they're contained within a folder and a group system like this, I want to contain the reverb for the drums within the drums bus. So you can do that again by using the direct outputs here. We'll go to the output and select drums. So now what we have is that the reverb output is actually going into this along with these. So the dry signals from this are going into the drums, and then the wet signals from the reverb are getting mixed together into the drums. So if I was to bounce the output of this one now, I'd get the reverbs printed along with the dry signal. So that's a really good way to do it. It also keeps everything nice and clean. I know that these effects that I'm using here are for the reverb. You may want global reverb set up for everything else as well. You can absolutely do that. I just like to be able to control things a little bit like this. So just remember to route these when you are exporting stuff, especially for exporting stems. You'll want to route these into the stems that you're routing everything else with, or to create an extra stem with your send effects. Right, so I'm going to stop that there. We're going to jump into side chaining because a lot of it is quite similar to this concept of routing to auxiliary channels. We'll set up some more effects down the line as we go on with the track. But for now, let's head into the next video and take a look at side chaining. Right, welcome back, guys. So let's talk quickly about side chaining. This is one of the things that people starting a new DAW, the first thing they want to learn is how to side chain. And it is such an integral part of producing electronic music. You know, we're making upfront stuff. You've got to have space for kicks and bass lines and stuff. And the side chaining is a sort of very important component to doing that. That said, there's a lot more that you can do with sidechaining, and I want to just take a look at Cubase's implementation of how to sidechain. We'll do a sidechain compression, the sort of old school way of doing it, where you can trigger a compressor on a part and duck it under the kick. And then I'll show you a couple of interesting other ways. Now, I just want to follow on from the aux sends, because the old way of doing things in Cubase, you actually used to set up a auxiliary send and send it to a plugin, and that would be the sidechain. It's slightly easier to set up now in later versions of Cubase, and Cubase 13 is no different. Let's jump in and we'll take a look. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be working on Retrolog here. This is our main sort of pads, and we're wanting to duck this underneath our kick drum. Let's actually just select the kick drum there. This is what it currently sounds like. And we want to make space for this underneath the kick. Now, the simplest way to do this is to go and add a compressor on our Retrolog. So this is the one that we're wanting to duck. We'll add in a compressor here. We'll just use the stock Cubase compressor. Here we go. We'll leave the settings for now. So what you're looking for here is this little button. You'll see this on pretty much every single plugin, especially VST3 plugins. They are all sidechainable like this. You click activate and deactivate the sidechain. So we'll turn the sidechaining on right now. So now it's accepting an external signal, which is going to be used to trigger the compressor. We need to choose where that signal is coming from. So when we click this little settings thing, it will say sidechain routing here. We can add a sidechain source. We're interested in bringing the kick in. And you'll see this looks familiar now because we've just done the send effects. And this is essentially, like I said, sending the kick signal to the plugin input here. It's going to be using this as a trigger. Now, note here as well that we have the pre and post fader as well, the same as what we looked at with the send effects. So this is useful in this case if we wanted to send a kick drum, for example, that was shorter than our actual kick drum, so that we had less of a trigger. You could essentially have a totally different kick drum triggering this compressor, but have the volume turned down. Because remember what I said, when you switch this into pre-fader mode, the volume is not taken into consideration anyway at all when it comes to the send. So the channel volume for that secondary kick, or ghost kick as we'd usually call it, would be completely down, so you wouldn't hear it. But it would still be sending signal to the compressor and still triggering your sidechain ducking. So this is really useful in that kind of situation. In this case, I'm going to leave it on post fader right now. This can also be good because if the kick volume fades down, I'd want the compression to fade away as well. Cool. So now that we've done that, we should actually be good to go. We can just play this back. Can you see the gain reduction is pretty much following the kick drum now? You can also jump to the kick at any time to see what's going on there. And you'll see here we actually have a send effect that is being sent to Retrolog, and this is the sidechain trigger. Like I said, auxiliary send essentially. So let's tweak this a little bit. We'll bring down the threshold quite a bit. So when it comes to setting up a compressor, the threshold is going to be how far down it gets pulled. I would normally turn off the auto makeup because we wanted to bring it down. We don't want to turn this up. I would rather turn it up afterwards. You could turn up the makeup manually if you wanted to. The attack and release are going to be the most important settings here when you're working on sidechain compression like this. This maybe as well, the ratio is just how much it's going to go down along with the threshold. But this is going to be how quickly the volume drops when the kick plays, and you kind of want this at its lowest setting. The release time is going to be how quickly it comes back up again. So this is essentially what you should be doing here is looking at the length of your kick almost. You kind of want this to come up about the same length of the kick. So if you've got a 100 millisecond kick, you probably want another 100 milliseconds on top of that. But you can also kind of move this around just to find something that feels natural. I want that a little bit further down. That's good for me. There we go. So that is sidechain compression. Now, there's plenty of other sidechain stuff that you can do here as well. So we can also apply this to EQs, for example, as well, using sidechains to make them dynamic. Let's try that out as well, just for the sake of this demo. We'll turn off the compressor here again, and let's go to frequency, which is the flagship EQ that comes with Cubase. So let's take a look at this first band down here. We've got a low shelf, I believe. No, we've got a bell there right now. Let's make this a low shelf. So we could just take it to about 100 hertz there. And we've got this gain reduction there. So what we can do now is we can actually turn this into something dynamic. So let's actually just click on it there to bring up the full edit window here. So I've just clicked on that band 1, and we can just reset the gain there. Let's go turn on the activate sidechain again, and once again you can select a sidechain source and choose kick. There we go. Now, I should also mention here that some of the plugins actually support multiple sidechains. So you could have the kick triggering something here. We could also have the snare triggering something. If we were to go sidechain 2, we could maybe bring in the clap, for example, and have that trigger a different part of the EQ as well. It's really quite complex what you can do when it comes to the sidechaining. But let's leave it at that for now. We're mostly interested in the kick, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn this EQ band on. We're going to turn the dynamics for this band on, and then we're also going to go to the sidechain section here, and you'll see we can now select either our clap, which is on sidechain 2, or sidechain 1, which is going to be our kick. Let's listen to that. So we've got the kick coming in here now. Let's take that off again. So now let's make our band 1, which is the low shelf. We're going to make that dynamic now. There we go. So there you go. You can see we're actually only ducking out the bass now instead of the entire signal. We can shift this up a little bit. And there you have it. So just look out for these sidechain things. There's a ton of different effects, even some of the modulation effects and stuff. A lot of the plugins will have this as an option. So when you see those, you know that you can actually send a signal in to trigger something. And this even applies to sort of more obscure effects like the new vocoder. And you can use the sidechain the same way to set up the vocoder, you'd put this on your vocal chain, which would trigger the dynamics of the vocoder, and you could actually route any synth output, so any pad sound that you wanted to use as the basis or the carrier signal for your vocoder patch, you could route that in via the sidechain in very much the same way that we've been doing the compressors here. Right, and just as a little bonus here, there's two very easy ways that you can kind of fake this as well in Cubase. One is with a new plugin, or it was released in version 12 actually, called FX Modulator. If we bring that one in, this one works very much like something like Shaperbox or LFO Tool. And we can just click the volume module here. Double clicking will put a node in there for us. Double clicking again. A single click would let us bend it slightly. There we go. Create curves. And we can do something like that. Of course, there are tons of presets here as well for those. And we just need to make sure, if you're working with something that's 4/4, that this is set to 1/4 timing. And this will now duck as well. So let's just turn off frequency, that is off. And there you have it. This, however, is not sidechain compression. This is a volume envelope, really. But you'll notice down at the bottom that you do also have a sidechain here. So you could, instead of using this set to the correct time, we could actually choose to trigger this from the kick and be very precise as to how this curve cuts out our audio. You can see the sidechain signal coming in here now, and it is essentially re-triggering that according to the kick now. And the same goes for the MIDI. You could actually bring MIDI in here. This is a MIDI sidechain rather than an audio one. Right, and the last way, just complete little bonus here. This only applies to when you're working with audio. Sometimes you might want to quickly just sidechain like an effect sample like this, for example. Let's bring that over here and just hit bounce to create a new version of that. You want to stick this in just a little container here so that you can edit this in the audio editor. It's a little bit easier. And we looked at this using the modifiers. We can use the cut tool, come to where the kicks are. So the kicks would be there, 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 and there, for example. And if you hold down the Alt key on your cut tool, you can click and it'll divide it nicely into those quarter beats, which are your kicks. You can then select everything here and just drag and then click, and you can actually draw in whatever sidechain curve you want. And there you go. Let's just take a listen to that one now. I've got this effect now, and manually sidechain via audio editing. Right, there we go. So we're going to move on now. We're going to apply a lot of the sidechaining stuff that we've done, the reverbs and the sends and everything, and we're going to start moving on to mixing this track a little bit further. I think in the next video, we'll apply some compression across the board, do a bit more sidechaining, a little bit more on the effects front as well before continuing. Right, I'll catch you in the next video. See you then. Cheers. Right, welcome back, guys. This video, I'm going to start looking at various different mixing tools like compression and EQ within Cubase. We're going to look at a couple of different compressors where we could use them, as well as some EQ tips and tricks as well. And let's just get the sort of foundations of this mix a little bit tighter and better put together. We're also going to incorporate some of what we've learned with the side chaining and just kind of bring that across through different elements of the track as well, and extend the reverb to a couple of other channels too. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, but we're going to kind of just nail down the sort of basics of the mix with regards to EQing and dynamics in this one. Right, so let's get started. We'll initially work on this little section here. Cool, and we need to kind of move our sidechaining over to a number of different tracks here as well. So a quick and easy way to do this is to just bring up the mixer here, for example. I want the sidechaining that we have on our retrolog chords to be on the bass line as well. So let's just set up the page. We don't have the inserts currently, so we can minimize the pre's, we can minimize the EQ here. Let's just set up what is visible. We want inserts, and we can do the strip as well. We'll take a look at the strip in the mixer, because you can do some compression and EQing from that too. Let's open up the inserts first. And we want this same, we're going to be using the compressor. So we use the standard Cubase compressor, which is set up for a sidechain right now. And let's just copy the settings for that one. We will go straight to the bass. Yeah, that's just the bass channel. We'll do it on that, not the bass group. If we had more parts within this bass group, we could probably do that all on this bus channel that we have here. In fact, we could do the same with the synths as well, although I do sometimes like to have a little bit of extra control over stuff. We could move this one over to the bus there, and then the bus would duck instead of just the individual parts, but let's keep it as the individual ones for now. Right, so what do we have here? Okay, that filter is being automated. Let's just bring this across, and you just hold like the same way that you would copy a part within the arrange page. You hold down Alt, and you'll see you get a little plus sign there, and you can copy that one. So the sidechain is enabled, but we just need to select what the source is going to be again. So we're going to go with the kick once again, and we'll leave that as post fader as well. And again, this is essentially just creating a new send on that channel to send to our compressor. So that's all good to go, and let's take a listen. There we go. So we've got our sidechain compression on the bass now too. Let's take a look at the EQs quickly. I want to just make sure that we are sidechaining the kick and the bass, but let's try and just make sure that this lead and the bass sit nicely together. We can do the same with the kick and the bass as well. Now, this is a really cool little thing with Cubase, that you can actually select on an EQ when you have it in this channel strip like this. This will actually compare to another channel. Select comparison channel there, so we can click on this one and choose the bass channel. So the red one in the background is our bass, and we are EQing currently the retrolog pads that we have, not the pads, the stabs, the little chord stabs, the main ones. So we could, to flesh things a little bit better, we could possibly do something like, okay, this one's being automated. We're using the low shelf here. We could possibly set this to a different low shelf as well. We've got this high pass. Let's go with high pass 2, which will allow you to dial in the steepness of this. Do something like that. And the cool thing is we can actually double click on this and it'll flip you over to the bass channel. So if I wanted to say, for instance, I can see that we've still got a little bit there. We can take even more of that off. We'll set this one to a 24 dB filter. I'm just right clicking on that to change the filter slope. And there you go. So really, really cool tool to just double check things when you're working. So if we're on the bass now, we can go to the bass and select a different comparison channel for the bass. So let's take a look at the kick, for example, as well. So these two are obviously occupying the same space, but it's less of an issue in this case because we're actually ducking the bass out when the kick is playing. So I'm not too concerned about those frequencies clashing there. Let's do the same quickly for the pads as well. We could probably cut quite a bit of this off. Let's also just make sure that we are not automating. Yeah, the filter's not being automated in this case. Right, let's do a little bit of dynamics processing here. So I'm going to want to compress these ones slightly. And we're probably also going to want to duck these a little bit as well. So we'll, again, just bring over the same compressor that we had, just drop it in here. And let's just reduce this one slightly. But now remember, this compressor is being used for ducking. This is not actually compressing the signal. So if I wanted to control the actual transients of this loop that we have playing here, we're going to use a second compressor for that. So perhaps let's just bring in one of the other options that we have. There's a number of Cubase compressors that we can use. We'll take a look at Cubase. We'll look at dynamics here. So a couple of the new ones in Cubase, both Cubase 12 and 13 raises a limiter. Squasher is a sort of OTT kind of compressor as well. You've got the tube compressor, vintage compressor. Those are available within the strip as well. Vox Comp is a new one in Cubase 13, which is a slower optical style compressor, as well as, I believe there was one more. Black Valve was the other one. I think in this case go with something that moves quite quickly. So we'll take the vintage compressor. Now, if you are a Sonic Academy subscriber, you can of course use SA76 for this as well, because they do sound slightly different, but the vintage compressor here is essentially a 1176 style compressor. So let's just dial in some compression on this. We'll turn up the input. Got 2.8. Cool, there we go. So you can see now we are controlling the peak slightly with this compressor, and then the second compressor is the one that's ducking everything underneath as well. Let's just take a listen to this again, yeah? We also need to just quickly make sure that we are selecting the kick for this one, so we can get that trigger in, and let's take a listen now. So notice as well that there's no sidechain occurring right now because there's no kick playing here, and that's one of the benefits of having this. You don't get that compression when there's no kick, when it's not necessary. Cool. Let's take a look at our drums quickly as well. I want to add a little bit of compression to this. So what we can do with the drums is we can do a little bit of sort of bus compression on everything. We have our drum bus here. So we can open this up and let's add in a, we'll go to Steinberg and let's try one of the new ones. We'll mess around with perhaps Black Valve or Vox Comp, maybe not so much. Let's go with Black Valve. So we just can dial up the peak reduction. We're not looking for too much compression, just a little bit. We can maybe bring up this drive slightly as well. And then we can just compensate for the gain reduction. So we'll just take a listen to the difference here. We can always just use this bypass button here to check. Let's just level match that a little bit better. I like what that's doing to the mix. Now, we're also going to look at compression on some of the individual elements here, but let's use the channel strip for this because you can do quite a bit there as well with dynamics, distortion, and envelope shaping as well, aside from just the EQing. So let's open this up and let's take a look at our claps for starters. Okay, so I want to first just compress the snare. We're going to use the channel strip here. So just activate the channel strip and you can turn on any of these tools. You can switch between various different options. You've got a gate, a noise gate on the first one. Then the compressor, you have 3 different kinds of compressors. So this is the same vintage compressor that we looked at before. If we click that on, you'll see you have the controls here for the vintage compressor. You can also expand this to see the UI within this channel strip window here. So let's use this one again. And we'll just drive the input slightly and compress. And then readjust the output. There we go. We can come back, and you also have a couple of other things. The tools section here as well. You can dial in envelope shapers if you want a little bit more of a spike on that clap. For something like where this might be interfering with a kick, for example, if you have quite a transient heavy kick, you could maybe even just bring this down and expand the length of this, and then the release time, turn that a little bit up. Let's take a listen to what that sounds like now. Yeah, how it's bringing up the tail, but also reducing the transient. And this actually works quite well because our clap, for example, is quite short. Let's maybe add a little bit of saturation to the clap here, just to make it bite a little bit more. You could also change this to tube saturation as well, for example. Now there's also a brick wall limiter in here, which is really nice to have with something really transient heavy like this. Just dial this down. Just getting a little bit of gain reduction there. We could probably, in this case, drive this a little bit more. There we go. Let's check out our other parts here as well. Let's take a look at just the equalizers here. And you can just use the arrow keys to flick through these. So our snare actually doesn't have any EQ on it currently. We should probably cut some of the lows out there. Same goes for our clap. There we go. Let's take a listen to the whole drum mix now. Let's also just add some compression to this loop. Just remove a little bit more of that. And let's use the channel strip once again. Yeah, we'll bring in the compressor. Let's use a different one this time around. Let's go with a tube compressor. You also have the standard one, which you're using for all of the sidechain. And I should mention, you can actually do the sidechaining directly from this too, rather than bringing in a different instrument like we've had. However, I don't think that you can actually, you don't have access to the same selection menu that you have, which is why I prefer doing it with an external plugin. This one you would then have to route, as far as I know, you'd have to route the, yeah, you have to route that manually. So you have to create a send from the kick. We could do that if we say, for instance, if we were going to send the kick to the trigger for this compressor, we would have to do that via this, and you'll see sidechains available here. loop strip. There we go. So you would have to send it to that one. So it's a little bit of a roundabout way of doing it. So I prefer to actually just use the plugin normally instead. But let's just bring in our compressor. We're going to look at the, let's say, the tube compressor, for example. Drive that one a little bit. Quite like a little bit of that character in here. There we go. So we've got our whole drum mix done now as well. Let's take a listen to that with the bass and our synth parts. Cool. That's sounding a lot more punchy now. Let's also just well, we added just something that's bothering me. I want to just take out a section of the sound when it drops again. So let's just bring open Hellion Sonic quickly. So you can see that this Hellion Sonic patch is made of two parts here. We've got layer 1 and layer 2, and I'm just trying to figure out which one is which. So let's just take a look with the amp level here. We've got, we'll solo this. Okay, so it's level layer 2 that I'm actually wanting to modify. And we're just going to quickly automate this, the level of the second part for the sound. Go to layer 2, and let's just right-click this one rather, and say show parameter automation track. Amp velocity, and yeah, we don't want the decays, we'll just go with this one. That's what we want. And let's bring this down. So when it comes in, we want that part of the sound off. Right, let's cut it there. Let's move on to the next video. We're going to carry on with mixing parts, but I want to kind of just show you guys a few other things in Cubase. We'll still come back to the reverbs and delays we'll set up as well at some point. But let's move on to the next video. I'll catch you then. I'll see you in a sec. Cheers. Right, welcome back, guys. So we're going to take a look at some spatial tools. Another big part of mixing is not just making space for things within the frequency realm or the time domain, like we've been doing with the sidechain compression and like what we've been doing with EQs, but also to make space for stuff within the stereo field, spreading things out so that they have their own place. So let's just take a look at a couple of tools within Cubase to aid you in mixing a little bit wider and making space in either side of the stereo field for your sounds. Right, so we're heading over to our drums first, and let's just go and loop a section here where everything is playing, and we'll just hit solo here. Right, so the number one tool here is just going to be to pan. It's going to be on your mixer. You've got panning controls here for everything. Let's take the shakers, for example. We can pan those left, we can pan them right. Now, it is a good idea to move things slightly off center. It just opens up space. For example, let's go with the hats can kind of all be spread, I think. Check out these. So I think these ones can actually go hard right or hard left here. We'll get those hard right. We'll keep the shakers in the middle for now. We can also just take a listen to our loop there because there's some hats in that loop too. We'll maybe keep those in the center. There we go. Now there's also different tools for panning here. Currently we've got a balance panner selected. If you right click here, you can actually change the panner type to a stereo combined panner. Now, stereo combined panners can be really useful when you're working with something that is inherently stereo and you want to move it over to the side. What happens if you go hard left, like we currently are now with this hat sound? You're essentially deleting any information that's in the right-hand side because it's no longer, it's turned down. So if you've got something that was recorded in stereo that has maybe some room reverb or something on it, you're taking that and deleting it completely. Sometimes a better way to work with panning stuff is to pan both the left and the right separately. And so you can do this with this combined panner. So what we'll do here is you'll see you can actually pan the signal left, but then you can pan the right part of the signal over to the center. And there we go. And you can actually pan this all the way over as well if you wanted to. You can pan the right over to the left side completely. But what you're doing here, you're panning the right to the center and the left to the left. So you've still got something that's weighted on the left-hand side, but you're not losing any of the stereo information. Bring that even further over if you want. But there's definitely a difference between this and the balance panner, which sounds like this. You're kind of removing stuff there. You see this drops all the way down. And if we use the combined panner, it's panned, but it's actually a slightly more natural feeling there. So we'll use the stereo combined panner for this one too. There we go. All right, so let's do some more panning with the shakers now. We'll do something that's automated or in motion. So we'll bring up the inserts here, and let's grab the auto panner for this. So under Steinberg modulation, you have auto panning. And this is a very handy little tool, this. So let's set this up to sync to our track now. We'll just set a triangle wave maybe for this one, and we want this to sync. And we're going to have the rate set to about 1/8, I think. And let's take a listen to what this sounds like. Go around to this, maybe a quarter. Turn the width right up. And let's just remove those so we can hear what's going on. Maybe reduce, turn the phase. We'll have the phase start at 90, so it's starting in the middle. And set that to 1/8 again. Okay, I'm going to turn this up slightly. So we're getting a nice bit of stereo and stuff going on there now. And you can hear the volume's dropping slightly. That's because of the panning. We can just adjust for that. All right, let's just take a listen to all of those together now. Right, so let's just come over to our kick now as well. So one thing that's quite smart to do sometimes, the kick should be mono for the most part, but sometimes you want to just make doubly sure. We can come down here to the special and panner section and perhaps use something like the mono to stereo plugin, which has a mono switch. So we can make sure that this is 100% set to mono. You can also dial down the width if you want. Now our kick is perfectly in the middle there. Let's look at a few other specialization options here as well. We're going to go to the pads. Let's take a listen to these. These could be spread out a little bit. So there's two options that you could look at here. We actually kind of come down to Steinberg again and look at the special and panner section and use the stereo enhancer. This can be quite nice on pad sounds. Just push it out into the sides a little bit further. You can adjust the color settings and the delay time as well. The other option here is to use the Steinberg Imager plugin, which gives you a little bit more control over various different bands as well. Spread the mid-range stuff out a little bit here. I think in this case I actually prefer what the Imager is doing, so let's remove the stereo enhancer. We could also make sure that the bass is in mono here. So let's go mono to stereo once again. And we'll just set this to 0 and mono just in case. And turn the color off there. We don't need that. Right, let's take a look at one other technique for increasing stuff in the stereo field, and that's using delays, but particularly a Haas delay, which is a really short amount of delay in milliseconds on just one side of the stereo channels. So what we do is we delay the right or the left channel by a couple of milliseconds to create a stereo effect. And this works really well with more percussive stuff or more transient heavy stuff, not so much with pads and things like that. So for example, we could come over to our clap here quickly. Maybe this one will spread over into the stereo field. So let's just open that up. We'll insert a mixer delay is what the plugin's called that you're looking for. So this is the mixer delay, and you'll see you have the left and the right side here. We're only interested in delaying one of the channels a little bit. So we can, say for instance, go to the right side and do 15 milliseconds. You don't really want to do much more than 20 because then you're going to start hearing the difference between the two. It should be less than 20 so you can kind of, it blows together and you can't really tell that there's a delay going on there. There's your clap. So without and with. See how nice and wide that stereo is now. And especially effective when you layer it with something else. That's our snare and our clap together now. Cool. So I think stuff is sounding a little bit wider now. Could maybe push this one out just a little bit as well. Let's use the stereo enhancer for this one. And just a little bit, not too much here. Right, so the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to set up another reverb because that will also, of course, help with spreading stuff under the stereo field. Now we have the drum reverb set up, but we need something a little bit more lush for the synth parts here. This time around, let's actually do the reverbs via the inserts, and you can do this as well. If you want to share the same reverb between different things, then it's better to put it on a send, of course. But in this case, what I want to do here is bring in the reverb on an insert because we're going to automate it at some stage as well. So let's take a look at the Steinberg reverbs that we have again, and we'll probably just use the same one. So these Rev X ones again are hardware. We'll look at doing Revelation again. So now in this case, we're going to want to turn the mix down because we're doing this as an insert, so everything is being reverberated. Now, if this was a send, we would want this at 100%. We can bring this down to about 25 now. Right, okay, so let's dial in maybe a little bit of modulation on this one. Want this to be a little bit brighter. Cut out some of the low end. Right, so that's sounding pretty good. Now I want to be able to automate this one, so we can just right click again, say show mix automation track. And now we have an automation track for our reverb mix here. So we've got our mix applied for most of the track here. It's a little bit more dry. We're going to use this to kind of bring it up almost to probably to full wet just in certain parts of the track. In build-ups like this. remember we can use the range tool to duplicate parts like this. And this one will extend out a little bit more. Right, so these ones actually have some reverb applied within the presets too. This one, this is also sufficiently stereo, and there's a bunch of delays on that too, so we're not going to worry too much about those for now. Let's cut it there. So that's some of the spatial processing within Cubase, and our track is now sounding a little bit wider and a little bit more full in the stereo field. Let's move on to the next video. I'm going to catch you guys in a sec. Cheers. Right, welcome back, guys. I want to talk about a feature set in Cubase which I really like. Cubase does it very well, and that's the direct offline processing within Cubase. This is applicable to audio mostly, but it actually allows you to apply effects and effects chains directly to specific audio files without having to bounce things down or via the regular render in place or audio export. Now, this is particularly useful for when you're working on like post-production stuff, but a lot of these techniques can be applied to writing music as well, specifically when it comes to like doing effect sounds and such. So we're going to look at a couple of examples here, and I'm also going to just briefly touch on the render in place as well while we're doing this. So the process of getting MIDI parts to audio or audio as well, printing effects and everything like that using the render in place function. So we're actually going to do the render in place first because I want to get a kick sample that we have over here. We want the kick drum and we want to create some effects using this. So we could grab that from the pool. We have the kick in the pool, so Control P will bring up that and we can find the actual kick sample that we used here, which would probably be the smart way to do it, but because I'm trying to teach you guys something here, let's just take a look at hitting render in place for this. So we're just wanting one kick, and let's say we just move this kick over here. And we're just wanting to bounce one kick. So we've got a part here with one kick, and we need to get this into an audio file. Now, I typically have a shortcut key set up for this, but let's do it via the menus first, and we can always set up a shortcut as well for this, because it's a function that you use a lot while writing music. So we'll go to File. So in File, you remember we have the audio mix down. We also have in the audio section the direct offline processing, which we'll come to now. And under Edit, you will have both freeze. So freeze works in kind of the same way. It will unload all your effects that you have on a track, and then it will essentially in the background render the entire track, but and replace it with audio rather than MIDI parts. But we want to have a little bit more control over this. I almost never use freeze. If we come to render in place, you'll see we have render with current settings and we have render with settings. And you can see I actually have Control Shift B and Shift B set up as shortcuts for this. So let's go Control Shift B. We'll bring up our settings. And this is the settings that we have now for the bouncing. A number of different things you can do here. You can do dry, transfer channel settings, just the channel settings. So the transfer channel settings will actually take whatever EQ settings you have and apply them to the new track. So in that case, it would take this sample that we have, this one note, and change it to an audio file, and then it would take anything that we have on this kick and put it onto that channel. So the EQ settings and everything. Channel settings, we can do the complete signal path as well, and then we can do the complete signal path including master effects. So this would mean if we had send effects and things that would be included. In this case, channel settings will be fine, and that's going to create any inserts that we have here, any EQs and stuff is going to be printed to audio with this. File location, this you can just use the project audio folder. You can create custom names for stuff if you want, or just let it do automatic. That's also fine. Everything else here is okay. Tail mode is a useful one. In this case, we're not going to have a tail because we have this section and then we have all this empty block behind it. But if you're bouncing a loop and you have delays on it or something like that, you may not want to cut the delays off when you're bouncing because it'll bounce this, for instance. And if there's a delay that goes past this, you want to account for that. So then you can actually turn the tail mode off and say bars and beats or seconds. And you could say seconds, let's say 10 seconds or whatever. That'll add 10 seconds after your section here. Or you could do this by bars and beats as well. So say maybe 4 beats, like such. It would give you 4 after this section. So that's useful to have as well. We don't really need it for this one right now. So just make sure that we have this one selected, and then we'll go Shift B, and there you go. So if you have this track selected, it'll actually export everything on this track. And you also have settings for that. You can have these as separate events, as block events, or as one event. So separate events will do each one of these separately. As block would do, I believe, selection, it'll do together. And then as one event, we'll just do everything as one. So we can actually just have a look at that. Let's say we do those there. So Shift B, that's as one event. And then if we do these as separate events, you'll get those kicks in separate audio files for each event there. So it basically mirrors what you have there. But anyways, we're happy with our kick there now. Let's get into the direct offline processing side of this. We've done the render in place. And remember that because you're going to use it loads during your tracks. And let's just pull this one. You'll see this has gone to a new track. Let's pull this one all the way down to the bottom here. We can actually just hide that for now. And this is going to go into our effects section. So before we begin, a couple of little cool things that you can do here. For instance, if you want more tail on this one, for example, like if you wanted to add a little bit of extra silence at the end, you can always just draw in a section there. Use the 4 key to select the paste tool, paste those together. Now you have one that you can go inside and edit. You could edit just on this one if you wanted to. You could also use the bounce shortcut that we have. If you go to audio and then bounce selection, our shortcut is B. That'll create a new audio file for this whole part here. So you'll see what happens. Now we have a single audio file that opens up like that. And we can come back, just undo that. We'll work just on this one in the audio editor. So let's take a look at our direct offline processing now. To bring up the offline processing window, the direct processing window, you hit F7. You can also access that from the Windows page there. I think it's for the audio section, I think. There we go. Not direct offline processing is accessed there. And now what we can do is we can add processes to this section and it process this piece of audio directly. So you may also just want to make sure that you have a unique audio file here. Remember what I said, sometimes if you're using instant versions, it will apply this effect to all those versions within the track. So if you're wanting to have a unique version, you can bounce that one to replace this event. Now you have a unique audio file that we're applying this to. And let's add some effects to this now. Now, the beauty of this is you can actually apply processes and plugins all at the same time. Processes will be things like fade outs, gain, adjustments. You can reverse parts, add silence to parts, etc. Time stretch things. And then we have plugins as well. So in this case, we're going to bring in a plugin first, because what I want to do here is cut out a bunch of the tops. So we'll come down to Steinberg again. Let's use the filter. And we'll use dual filter or more filter, I think. More filter. Let's do more filter here. And we can audition this. Let's do the audition loop. And I want this filter. Cool. So we've got this nice sort of low sub hit that we're getting from that kick now. So what we can do now as well is also maybe add in a revelation. And you'll see it's actually applied it already there. Let's bring the mix down half. And look what happens again now. It'll just update it for you. And let's bring this main time way up. We'll go with a chamber maybe. And we can audition this and hit loop again. Right. So you can hear it's applying that reverb, but it's also cutting it off now because we didn't add a tail to this. So what we can do to this is actually add in a tail. So let's click on this tail button here, activate tail, and we'll add in 10 seconds of additional tail to this. That should have... I'm not 100% sure why that tail is not doing it automatically here. It should be auto-applying that. But what we can also do is, let's take these two processes. Something that we're going to want to do often. We can just go drag and drop those in here and create a preset. So we'll say deep verb, for example. We've saved those processes now as a preset in the direct offline processing here. So let's turn this off here. So now we're back to our kick. And let's just manually create that tail. So like I said, let's go bounce. And now we've got this long tail here. We can click this one to open this file again. Here's our audio file. And let's bring up the direct offline processing again. And now we can just go deep verb. So look at our file that we've got over here right now. And in this case, it actually has added the tail in now. We can actually turn the tail off if we want to now. And for some reason, Cubase doesn't want to update that for me. But we'll leave the tail there now. And there you go. So now you've got your reverb applied to that audio file directly as an effect. There's also a shortcut way to do this, but I wanted to show you that one first because that's how you do these chains. Now you can actually go back and edit these chains and it'll undo it and then reapply the audio to that again. But if you want to sort of solidify this now, you want to kind of get rid of that so you can maybe apply different chains, you can use the bounce command again. So bounce is going to create a new audio file from this. Those are now printed into the file permanently. And you can just cut this down. You can add additional things like fade outs and so on in this. And then, of course, we could also go back to this again. You'll see this has been cleared out. So we could apply different stuff to this now if we wanted to. Right. Now, the easy way to do this as well, to apply these sorts of effects, remember stuff like reverse is also considered a direct offline process. That can also be accessed from the right-click menu that we have here. So if you go to processes, you have all of those available to you here. However, these are going to apply them one by one. You can't do them in a chain and you can't really edit them afterwards. Once you apply it, it's done. These ones here, you can also assign a plugin. So we can go to plugins here. We can select, say, Steinberg again, and let's grab something like Bit Crusher, for example. And we can put Bit Crusher on this reverb here as well. It'll give you the direct offlining thing. You see it's done this automatically. And there it's applied. And once again, if you want to make this permanent, do B and it'll render a new file for you. We'll take that off for now, though. That Bit Crusher, we don't need that there. Right, so now we've got our effect in here. Let's take a listen to what we've got. That's great. Now, another great way to do this is to, let's say, for instance, if I want to reverb on these reverses here, I don't maybe necessarily want the reverb on all of this. So I can do this obviously via automation, but I also like doing these by direct offline processing instead, because you can always cut the reverb where you don't want it. The thing is, when you're doing this with automation, it's a lot harder to do that. So we'll just, in this case again, same story as before. We can just select these two and let's say bounce together. We'll create a new audio file. Let's paste these two together and create a new audio file for this one. There we go. And I can just go to F7 again to bring up the offline processing. Let's use the same settings as the reverb that we had before. We'll use deep verb and we'll just take the morph filter and remove it. So now we've just got that revelation reverb in there. You can see it's applied it already. And we can just double check that we like it. That works perfectly. And we can print that again. There you go. So that's offline processing and render in place. Very, very handy, these tools, when you are working in Cubase, especially for the audio editing stuff. I love working with this in Cubase. The audio editing is bang on a lot of the time with Cubase. Great. So there we go. Let's listen again. this one over here. Same goes for the kick. I might actually in this one here too want to get a reverse reverb. So let's just quickly do this one. This time around, let's reverse it first. So we'll use the right click functionality here, processes, reverse. Bring this one over here. Add in a section, paste the two together. We'll render this file again. F7, bring in our deep verb, remove the morph filter again. We'll use the same preset here. Let's apply the reverb. And we can then bounce this again to print the reverb into this file and then go back and process and reverse it once again. And now we've got a reverse reverb at the beginning of this effect. So we can take a listen to this now. So you see how easy it is to manipulate effects and audio when using this direct offline processing as well as the render in place as well. Cool. We'll stop there and let's move on to the next video. See you in a sec. Cheers. Right, welcome back, guys. So this video and probably the next one, we're going to just highlight a few different plugins and do a couple of cool things with them in Cubase, all native Cubase plugins, and most of them fairly recent ones as well, I believe. So let's take a look at FX Modulator. Now, we did briefly look at this when we looked at the side chaining. I showed you how to just set up a volume envelope. And FX Modulator obviously is very much like Shaperbox or LFO tool from Xfer. We'll bring in the FX modulator here and we'll just talk about what's going on here. Right, so we are presented with the main page here. This is going to be where your envelopes get drawn in. However, you can't do anything right now until you actually load an effect. So you see you have a number of different effects modules that you can work with here. We looked at the volume one before. You just click one of those to insert it into the chain here. And then, of course, you can add more and more and more. So we can look at, say, reverb, for example. We could do frequency shifters, and obviously these can be moved around as you see fit as well. Let's actually remove our volume one. So what you see here, you'll see it's labeled shift at the top here. That is whatever parameter we are going to be modulating. So we have the shift one, feedback, for example. All of these can have their own individual time signatures. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to create sort of like an 8-bar riser effect on this. So let's just select this section here. So that's controlling the mix of the shift that we have there right now. We can go and set this to 8 bars, for instance. And you'll see that's going to coincide with this section here, so we can kind of draw in a multitude of different effects that are all being automated over time. So let's add in a notch there, and we'll take this one and we'll bump it up. So we're going all the way up to 1,000 with the frequency shifter over time, and we are modulating the shift parameter here. So let's play this back again. And of course, you're not hearing anything right now because we have the mix down. So let's turn the mix up again. So we've got a nice riser effect happening there. It's quite a lot at the moment by itself. Let's add in a few extra ones here. What we'll do is we'll maybe do we can do a filter. Let's move the filter before the reverb. We'll set the reverb, the filter as well to 8 bars again. There we go. We'll change the filter type to a high pass, maybe a 12 dB high pass filter. And this one, we're going to want to just bring the filter double click to create a node there. We'll bring the filter all the way down and we'll come up to about here. But we're also only going to use the filter in this last segment here. So we'll do something like this. And then we'll do the same with the reverb as well. We'll dial in some reverb over this last section here. We can adjust the time, the size, we'll bump that right up. No pre-delay. And we are adjusting the mix for the reverb, and on the filter, we are adjusting the frequency. We could have a separate one for the Q value as well. In fact, we probably want to bring this one down so that the Q value is not too high. We don't have too much resonance. Leave it here somewhere. And then there's a couple of other things like smoothing. You've got some automatic shapes, which we're not worrying with now because we're doing quite a sort of drawn out effect here. You can also then split these effects into different frequencies by turning on the filter bank here and applying them only to specific areas of the frequency spectrum. But for this right now, this is going to work for us fine. I'm going to add in one more. Yeah, let's go with, let's try out the pitch shifter as well. And we're going to play around with the formant on this one, I think. Let's maybe do this again. And adjust this one to be 8th again. Right, so let's play this back now and take a listen to what's happening. I quite like the effect that's giving. Obviously, it's way too much now. It's too atonal. But what we can do now is actually play around with the master mix for the entire plugin, which is this one here. And this one can then just be automated. So we can right-click on this, say Show Mix and Automation track, and we'll come down to our synth bus that we have this on right now, and we can go and apply this to this section here. Let's take a listen to what we have now. And I really like what that's doing now. We've got a pretty cool effect happening there. The last one I want to do is just add in a filter for this one here because I don't like the bass playing there. I want that to kind of fade out slightly. Got more filter on here doing that, so we can just check our automation lane. We've got more filter frequency, and this one I want to slowly fade out over time. Let's try something else with FX modulator. We'll come up to the drums bus, I think. Cool, so let's just loop a selection here. We're going to work on the drums bus again, yeah, and apply this to everything. Now, I used to do this kind of thing with loop mash effects. You can trigger this with various different keys or in a MIDI channel, which I can show you how to set up as well. So it's pretty cool just for adding little fills in places. Right, so let's do some just sort of creative effects on the drums here. We'll use loop mash effects. We can also use FX modulator to do some stuff like that. And let's play around with the time shifter, for example. If we were to just draw in some, this one can be a little bit annoying with the double clicking, sometimes not working. Take a listen to what the time shifter does. So if we were to keep things a little bit more square with this one, we could get some sort of nice little stuttery effects doing things like this. But now, just like loop mash, I may not want to have this running the whole time. We may need to trigger it with something else. So I want to show you how to set up triggers like this. And this will apply to other effects like vocoders, for example. We could even take a loop at that as well. Let's create a MIDI channel underneath our drum section here. And we can already set up the outputs here if we want. If we click on the output section, we are going to be looking for the drums, which is our drums bus. So this is the channel name that we have here, drums. And you see we have insert 2, which is loop mash effects, MIDI in. And we also have drums insert 3, which is the FX modulator MIDI in. So let's choose loop mash first. We'll create a MIDI channel for this, and we'll call this loop mash trigger. And we want to make sure that this is record enabled, and we'll solo this one as well. And let's play this back, and I'm just going to play on my keyboard now. And let's just disable FX modulator first. Make sure that the loop mesh trigger is selected. And there you go. So we are actually sending a MIDI note now to enable that effect on and off. And we could basically now just create MIDI parts here and add notes to sections that we want to add fills in. So, and we do actually have a scale assistant on. You can see this is currently turned on. And we want to turn that off because obviously we're not working with scales here. We want to just be able to move the notes around freely in this case. So we can add a fill in there. And let's play around with adding in one of these tape stop slides further down. We'll try and see if this works. Running into the break here. That's the reverse. Might actually help if we could just see what we are doing. I just want to go 2 up, I think, on this one. There we go. All right, let's check that out with the rest of the track in there. In fact, we want that just to be there. Cool, we can leave that in there just as like a little transition into the drop. And of course, this works with the vocode as well. I'll show you just a quick example of that. We can create one more MIDI track here. And let's just add a vocoder to our drums channel. We can take the MIDI track here and make sure that this one is going to the vocoder MIDI input. And let's play this back now. Make sure that you have MIDI 2 selected. And you can see, I can hear that I've already got some signal going in there. Take this one off. Now with this new MIDI channel selected, let's play some notes. And there you go. So that's all the same principle, using triggers from MIDI channels to trigger effects. So we've got some nice little creative effects going on here with FX modulator, with the loop mash effects. I think we'll keep the loop mash triggers and we'll delete these other ones. Those are more just for demonstration purposes, and we'll actually just remove the vocoder. We're not going to use that. But now you guys know how to set up those kind of effects and trigger them from MIDI channels. Cool. Let's move on to the next video. I'll catch you in a sec. Cheers. Right, what's up, guys? So this video, I want to just look at a few other plugins in Cubase again and continue to just do a little bit of random work around the track. I want to kind of focus on stuff which adds coloration to your tracks, a little bit of character and so on. There's a number of newish plugins in Cubase that do just that. We're going to look at some examples of EQs as well as distortion as well. Let's dive right in and let's jump into our bass line first, because one area that you quite often want to add harmonics to is sub stuff. You're adding harmonics to it'll kind of just, if you have just a sine wave bass, it becomes hard to hear sometimes above everything else in the mix. So you may want to add in frequency content higher up the scale. So let's take a look at our bass line quickly. Right, so let's bring in some distortion on our bass line. So we'll open up our bass channel here and take a look at some of the options that we have. So one that I often come to, which has been around in Cubase for quite a while now, is Quadrafuzz, which is a multi-band distortion unit. As you can see here, we've got 4 different bands that you can change the frequency cutoff for, so we can sort of focus in on specific areas of the frequency range. Then you can adjust the distortion as well as the types of distortion for each one of these bands. There's also some width controls here, which is useful to have when you're working with more stereo stuff as well. You could maybe just bring out some of the stereo content or the side content more in certain parts of the frequency spectrum. We could try that on the Retrolog ones as well. So there's more that you can do with this than just add distortion. You can also adjust the gains and use this a bit like an EQ. Let's just take a listen to what it's doing. First on the bass, for example, we could maybe leave the low stuff clean and add some harmonics in this section. We can change different types. I quite like that tube, just adding a bit more presence to our bass now. That one obviously quite aggressive distortion. Multi-band bit crushing. Let's go back to our tube. Quite like just a little bit of that tube in there just to kind of bring out a little bit of presence in this. We could also take a listen to some other options as well. There are a few different options that we could look at for distortion. A newish one is Destroyer, which is more of a sort of clipping algorithm. Or wave shaping algorithm, and we can adjust the area that it's being applied to as well. Far more aggressive sounding distortion this though. Another good one to use on bass, which is a little bit more subtle, is the tube as well, and Magneto, which coincidentally we've looked at in the saturation section of the channel strip as well. So you can always bring those in, they both sound pretty good. So let's leave the Magneto one, that's the tape emulation. We won't bring that in somewhere else. I like what the tube is doing from Quadrafuzz on that bass. So let's take a look at Quadrafuzz again. Like I said, this is quite useful for just sort of focusing the areas as well, and maybe increasing the stereo field for them too. We've already got a stereo enhancer on here, but I'm going to just move this Quadrafuzz in here as well. You can always reorder plugins just by kind of dragging them up and down. And we can probably remove this FX modulator and frequency. We're not using those right now. And let's just take a look at what the sound shaping works with, so something that's not just sub-frequencies as well. Can really use this like an EQ to kind of bring out the presence in parts a little bit more. And we could sort of make sure that all the lows are mono, for example. Well, in this case, we could actually spread them out even more because our sub is mono, so play around with the stereo field here. Can mix between dry and wet for these as well. And there is even delays on this one as well. We could try and dial in some of that. Let's do a dotted delay. And it's now delaying just this band. It's pretty interesting what we're getting with that now. A little bit of extra detail in the delays. So the original. It's really a useful tool for just kind of sculpting sounds, adding a little bit of bite, a little bit of character. So we just pushing a little bit in this range now, kind of pushing it forward a little bit of stereo field, and a little bit of movement from the delays in the background as well. Just subtle delays happening there. So I like that too. Right, let's look at a few other character plugins as well. Let's come to our drum bus again, and we'll add in magneto on this. And just give our drums a little bit of bite as well, a little bit of tape saturation. And take a listen to this without. And I believe I put this on the reverb. So let's put this on the drums bus instead. We've got Black Valve on there, which is actually doing some drive as well. Let's take a look at magneto as well. Could add a little bit of shine. A little bit more drive. There we go. Just a little bit of subtle processing on that. Another one we can look at here is some of the new EQs that have been provided with Cubase 13 as well. So we've got the EQ P1A and the EQ M5. Now these come with the vocal strip plugin in Cubase 13. Let's go with this one. It is a Pultec style EQ. And these are great for adding a little bit of a low boost, a little bit of shine on top as well. They're pretty unique in that you can boost and attenuate or cut at the same time. Let's just take a listen to what this sounds like on our drum mix here. All right, let's take a listen to the EQ. You can kind of hear that nice smooth thump that you get at the bottom when you dial in the attenuation and the boost at the same time. So we'll just give our kick a little bit of extra weight. You could add a bit of shine to this too. Let's take a look at the EQ-M5 as well. This is just another Pultec style EQ. This one obviously had the mid attenuation. You can cut the mids and the low boost and the high boost, and then you can set the frequencies for this. There you go. So these EQs do have a bit of character as well to them, so those are pretty cool for just adding a little bit of color to your mixes as well. Right, so I just wanted to highlight some of those plugins for you. Let's jump into the next video. We'll continue, and we're going to take a look at some visualization and metering next. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers. Right, welcome back, guys. This video I want to focus on a plugin in Cubase called Supervision. Now, Supervision is a metering and visualization plugin. It's extremely useful. There's a bunch of modules in there that can tell you a wide array of different information. And I want to take a look at where you can set that up and a couple of things that we can do with this. So one place that I like to have supervision set up is in my control room section. So in level 1, we looked at the layout for Cubase, and we did cover the control room. If we look on the right-hand side in this pane here, we've got the control room section. And if you come over to this tab at the bottom, we can actually flick over to the Inserts tab. So right here, we have this volume control down at the bottom here with some metering. You could have a look at the meter there as well. You can switch to loudness at the bottom and then the master meter. But in the control room, you've got this Inserts tab here. And we can actually put, you'll see I have one in here by default at all times. We can put supervision on as a plugin into this insert section here. Now this insert works very much the same way as any other insert does. However, this is not part of the mix. So this is essentially your monitor output. So let's say, for instance, if we went to stick a bit crusher or distortion on this, we'd hear this through the monitors. But if we were to export the track, that wouldn't be part of the mix at all. This is purely for your monitors. So this is where, ideally, if you're using something like Sonar Works to modify the output of your speakers to suit your room, that's where this kind of stuff would go. Metric AB from Plugin Alliance is always a staple on this for me as well. It's where I kind of do all my A/B tests and stuff inside of this control room section. But having this here now means that we can take a look at anything coming through our master and going out of our speakers. We can take a look and analyze that. So there's a number of different settings that we have here. I currently have this set on the wave scope. You can see you can kind of modify all of these. You can decide to move them around a little bit. You've got loudness and true peak info over here. We've got our stereo monitoring there. I think this may be the phase meters as well. Let's just take a look. And then we've also got this wave scope here, which is very handy. I'll show you that in a sec. Right, so we've got some metering going on there. You can see we're at minus 1.8 true peak. We should probably bring that down to about minus 6 before we export stuff, but we can adjust that as we need to later. This one is the phase correlation meter over here. You want to be careful of things dropping down into this -1 area, but we can see predominantly, especially our kick, you can see our kick coming through there. That is in phase right now, which is important. We want that, we don't want to have negative phase for that. Doesn't matter if there's a little bit of that in there, but you know, the bass frequencies really want that to be in phase there. And then the wave scope obviously gives us a sort of oscilloscope of what's being played through it. And the nice thing about this is that we could just solo anything at any given time and see the information that we want to. Yeah. So let's look at our kick, and we could then expand this to view things a little bit easier. And we can do stuff like that. We can right click on this to actually freeze it and take a look at what's happening with our kick here. In this case, if I wanted to make the kick a little bit more punchy, I may want to focus on maybe, you know, pushing the transients in this section out a little bit more, and then maybe clipping something there. We could play around with that so you can see how that works as well. If we come over to our kick, for example, let's open up the sampler. Well, actually, we can do this with a transient designer. Let's open up the one that we haven't looked at before, the multi-band envelope shaper, for example. And you can now very easily see what's occurring after the processing if we have this wave scope open. So let's play this back now, and we'll tweak our kick a little bit here. So let's maybe add some attack in this section. So you can see our kick looks very different now. We could also maybe reduce the length of the subsection here, so we could maybe reduce the release here. So it's really easy for us to sort of get an idea of what's occurring with the kick. This is extremely useful when it comes to stuff like clipping as well. Using the mouse wheel, we can zoom in and out here. Holding control over here, so we can actually increase the sort of resolution of it and decrease it, zoom in as well. We could also mess around with just the brick wall limiter in this case. Maybe just to shave off the peaks of those transients of the kick. Look at the difference in the kicks there now. And I quite like what we're doing with that transient designer now as well, the envelope shaper. Kicks a little bit more punchy right now with that little bit of envelope there. So yeah, so that's those decisions are a lot easier to make when you have something like supervision set up. Now there's a number of different options that you can use in this. There's a bunch of presets. So you have some presets here, which is like various different loudness criteria, as well as things that you may be doing, like music editing, for example. We can click that on, and it'll have a set of parameters for you for that. So obviously this one here is showing us the frequency range for the clap. Got a spectrogram over here. That's our stereo information, our levels. We've got some time code as well, and a wave scope here, and the phase. Let's go to the next preset. We'll take this one. This one actually shows a frequency on a keyboard, which is really interesting. So if you wanted to take a look at sort of tonal aspects of sounds, we can do is just move this one from the clap. Let's take our supervision from the clap and let's put that on the bass line. And let's open that up again now and have a look at this. So this one's really interesting now because we can see our root notes for the bass there. And remember that we added some tube drive harmonics in using quadrifiers, and then you can actually see the harmonics being added up the frequency spectrum there as well. These are, in fact, from the distortion that we added. So really useful information that you have here. And then if you want to change any of these at any given time, you can use the presets, but you can also build your own presets. Let's say if we find this one useful, but we want more information here, we could say, for example, just split this in half. We can click on the meters here if we don't want those. We can change this to any of these. Let's say like the phase balance, for example. Or we could look at phase in different ways. Let's look at a phase scope. So our bass obviously is mono, which is good to you can see that there in the phase scope right now. Multi-panorama. Again, mono, so we're not getting much information there. Let's look at the spectrum bar. So yeah, a ton of different things that you can do there. So yeah, supervision, I would always keep a sort of set of basic things available up here, and then also the ones that you want to use often, just save them as presets or the presets they have here. It is fairly easy to set up your own stuff, but you want to kind of have these saved and ready to go for various different tasks that you may want to do. So we're going to keep that up here because we're going to get into mastering and balancing this mix out soon as well. And then this is going to be important for us to check levels and take a look at our frequency curves and so on. So perhaps before we move on, let's maybe set up a preset here for stuff that we want to check when we are mastering, for example. We want the levels. The wave scope is good for us now at the stage when we are doing the clipping and stuff. It may be less important later on. What I would want to see as well, we could probably half this one and then bring in reduce those to this. We can reduce. I would want to also see the frequency spectrum here. So let's look at this frequency curve. And we can have the wave scope a little bit smaller like that. And it's just really nice to be able to move things around like this to suit your needs. So I think this is a good setup here to have on your control room now, especially when you're wanting to mix. You've got all the relevant information that you may need here. So let's cut there. We're going to move into the next video. We're going to start putting together a master project, and then I want to look at some processing that we can do to finalize a track. Right, I'll catch you in the next video. See you then. Cheers. Right, welcome back, guys. So this video, we're going to kind of just do a recap of exporting, but I want to show you a few extra little bits and pieces, some really handy little tips, especially for when it comes to doing radio edits and such. Now, you may not be doing radio edits at this stage if you are a beginner, but I think this is a really useful thing to know. So let's just take a step back to what we did with level 1. We're going to export the track again. However, this time with the intention of setting up a master track that we're going to master, or a master project, I should say. So let's first just double check. We want to bring up our mixer before we start setting up anything here, just to make sure that all the channels that we have are indeed going to the right places. We are once again going to do a stem bounce here. However, I think I may just move the kick drum out of the drum bounce so that we have that separate. Now, what you want to do here is to just open up the routing here and just scan through this. You want to make sure that, okay, so everything that we have here is going to the drums and the drums effects. So the drum effects, I just processed a loop with Quadrafuzz, just soloed one of the bands. It's just a sort of distorted drum loop in the background there, so that's fine, but we want that to go to the drum bus as well, so we'll just send that to drums. Right, so all of that is going to the drums, and the drums over here, these should all be going to the stereo outputs, and then our stereo output obviously doesn't have an output, so that's all correct. Drums, 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 these are fine. So we've got bass, we've got synth, synth, synth. I'm just making sure that everything has a group assigned to it, so that when we select the group outputs, we don't have wayward things being sent to just the stereo out by itself, because we're actually not going to bounce the stereo out in this case at all. All right, so everything has been put into channels. We'll keep things simple. Like I said, let's maybe just assign a bus to this one as well. Now we could just send this directly to the stereo out, but then we'd have to balance the stereo out. I'm gonna just create another group track for the selected channel. So we're gonna override the drum bus routing that we have. We'll add group track to select the channel. I'm just gonna call this one kick. And this kick bus now, let's just double check that everything sounds correct. Right, so the kick is coming through on its own kick bus here. We can also just move this over here so it's nice and neat in the mixer. So let's just click on the zones tab there. And let me just label these the correct colors. This one can be blue. And the drums one can be light blue, I guess. There we go. Perfect. So we've got all our buses set up now. So let's just talk about the radio edits now. I want to just show you another feature in Cubase that plays really nicely into the exporting functions of Cubase as well. So let's grab our entire track that we have finished here. We're going to go P to add the loop to the entire track. Now I'm going to create a new channel here, and it's one that we haven't looked at yet. We're going to open up this channel and open up the markers channel. Let's just call this track. Let's call this edits, for example. I'm going to add a track, and you'll see it may have actually opened the markers. Let's put it down here. So let's move this up to the top, or we could even move it into this section. We'll just leave it up to the top for now. So let's leave it there. And this gives us the opportunity to add in different markers in a track. So we have a position marker, and we have what's called a cycle marker. Now the difference between this, a position marker is a single point, which will be 1 there, for example. And you'll see when you have the marker track selected that you could just go to 1. If we had another marker over there, we have 2 there, we could just go to 2. And we can go back to 1, and we can move our player head around. So it's just that's a really easy way of getting around a track or finding positions of interest within a track, especially when you have bigger projects going on. What I'm interested in here, though, is that one is the cycle markers. So you have to see this one here, and watch what happens when we add a cycle marker now. So you see what it's done here is it's taken the loop that we have here, and it's basically placed a marker which mirrors that loop, essentially. So let's just quickly first also, a good practice with exporting is to actually just include a little bit of space in the beginning and the end. So what we can do here is we could just use our range tool to select a section like this and use Control Shift E to insert silence. So you'll see we've just bumped everything over by 1 bar. And then let's just go and select our range again, yeah? We'll just select 1 bar after this section. Right, so we've got that in place now. We've got the loop marker set up. We've got a little bit of additional space at the beginning so we don't have any kicks being cut off or whatever when it starts. And let's just go add cycle marker. In fact, add 2 there. Let's add the cycle markers again. There we go. So we've got cycle marker 1. And what we'll do is we will rename this marker. You'll see if we click on the marker here, you have an ID and you have the description. Again, if you don't have this, make sure that you set that up by going to the settings here and have the info line and the status line available to you. We can add a description for this, and we'll call this one extended. And there's a reason why we're labeling these now. I'll show you that in a bit. So we've got extended there. And let's, we're not going to cut a radio edit now, but let's say, hypothetically speaking, we were to go and make a radio edit for this. We could just duplicate our track over here. Let's just do that again with the automation. So remember, if we wanted to copy automation as well, we need to make sure that the automation follows events there. We can duplicate again. We'll see our automation is copied now. Let's just drag this one over to about here. And let's assume this is going to be a radio. It's probably going to be a little bit shorter. We'll take that out. Let's just take all of this stuff out here. And we'll assume the track starts there, for example. And yeah, let's just leave it at that. Let's not waste too much time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to highlight this. And we'll just again add just a bar on this side just to make sure that we've got a little bit of space. Add a bar on that side as well. And let's go and insert another cycle marker. We'll come to the top here and just add the cycle markers in. So now we've got this one. We'll just delete that one. It actually copied the cycle marker when we duplicate it. So we've got our extended. And this ID3, we're going to give this a description of radio. Right, so we've essentially got 2 edits in one track now. The beauty of this is that if we need to make changes to, let's say, an EQ on the bass, for example, we don't have to do that twice for the radio and the extended. We just do that once for the entire selection of all the edits. We've got the radio here and that one there. So any changes that we make to the channel are going to be across both of the edits, which is exactly what we want. The only thing that we're going to be doing here is cutting and adding bits, maybe making things shorter for the radio edits. Right, so there we go. So we've got that ready. Let's head over to our export dialog now. So we're going to export stems for this so that we can then master our projects. And we're going to be mastering a radio and an extended version. So let's go to File, Export, Audio Mixdown. We'll clear all of this stuff is from our level 1 course. And what we're going to be interested in here is exporting our kick, FX, synths, bass, and drums, just the groups. We're not going to do the stereo outs in this case because we are going to master this afterwards. So we did check our levels. We were a little bit hot, but our peaks are not going over. And we're also exporting in 32-bit, which is what we're going to set up here. So 32-bit files, if you export like this, you can always recover overs. So if something has clipped, we can just turn it down and it will not be clipped anymore when we are mastering with those. However, it is good practice to make sure that you don't have stuff too hot, but I'm not going to go back and change that now. So we're going to leave that at 32 bits. Let's set up our naming structure again like we did in the first one. So we've got Sonic Academy. Level 2 will be the name of the track. Now, before we finish setting this up, I want you to come down here. We're going to look at this locators range here. So normally we export the locators, which means that we would export this highlighted purple area that we have here. What we're going to do is we're going to switch over to cycle markers, and you'll see this now becomes available. And this is why we wanted to do the naming here. you can see we have extended and radio. So we can choose to export stems now for extended and the radio edits as well. And on top of that, when it comes to our naming structure, let's open this up. So we can decide that we want the cycle marker ID. I'm not so bothered about the cycle marker ID. We'll leave that one off. We want the track name. We can have the channel type, which is going to be group. Then it's the channel name. That we can maybe change the type. We don't need that so much there. And we probably don't need the channel number either. So we've got Sonic Academy Level 2. We've got Kick, which is the name of the channel, or the group channel that we have. And what we're going to do then is bring in the cycle marker name. There you go. So we've got the track name, what stem you're exporting, and we've got what version of the track it is, whether it's going to be extended or radio. Let's click OK there. Okay, as I said, we're doing 32-bit stems. Effects, we're doing groups and sends as well. And what we're going to do in this section after export is we are going to go to create a new project. And this is the project that we're going to do our mastering in. And now lastly, let's just check where this is sending this to. It is the Cubase projects on my drive, Sonic Academy, Cubase level, and then Mixdown. That's fine. We can just add those files to the Mixdown directory there. Now just to start the export, we're just going to go to add to queue. And take a look at what has been added here. We've got Sonic Academy Level 2, we've got drums, bass, synths, FX, kick for all the extended versions. Come down, we've got for the radio versions, drums, bass, synths, FX, and kick. And that's exactly what we're looking for. All we have to do now is hit start queue. And it's going to do all our exporting for us in one go with a single click. Now, I don't know many DAWs that can do this. This is an awesome feature. When it comes to stuff like creating samples and variations of samples, you can just set up little loop markers like this for various bits of audio with naming structures and everything. And in one go, you can export a whole day's work of sound design and so on, and have everything labeled correctly for you. It's fantastic. So we'll just let this run its course now. I'll catch you in the next video. See you in a sec. Right, so welcome back, guys. This is what we left with after the exporting that we did from the previous video. You can see it's brought in all our stems for us here. Obviously, the radio edit stems over here, and these ones would be the extended one. Place them at different points in the track. Right, now we can leave them on different channels like this. We could also bring this one back up to here and have them on the same channels as before, and then set up the warp markers again. Or we could leave them here. We could even just bring them back here and then export these two separately when we wanted to. We don't want to have to master both of them at the same time, though. So what we will do in this case is add these two to a group, for example. We could do a folder track, actually. Add those. We'll just call this radio. Do the same for these. And that's a little bit neater now. And then what I want to do is, rather than master into the stereo output, I would actually go and create a group here and call this one master channel. And the stereo master is what we're going to be routing into. So we're going to make sure that these are all routed into the correct place. Now you can see when you import from a new project from a sample export, it kind of gives you this bare bone windows here. So you want to probably go and turn on all of this stuff again so that we have all our information available to us. And we can go and just select all of our channels here. I need the folder, and we want to make sure that these are all being routed to, using Shift and Alt once again to do the key-link group master channel. Make sure that these are all going to the right place. Just keep an eye on this one here. All of them are going to the master channel. So that's all good. And the master channel is where we're going to set up our master. Right, so we're going to run through a number of plugins and just take a look at setting up a mastering chain here. Um, First things first, I want to just discuss this little green line down at the bottom here because I haven't actually mentioned this. We have discussed pre and post fader with the sends. When you set up a send to send to an effects channel, you get the pre and post options. This is exactly the same. This little line here can be dragged up and down to various positions in your insert chain. And anything before this line is going to be pre-fader, meaning that audio comes into the section here, it'll be processed by a plugin here, and then it goes to the fader. Think of this fader as the green line here, and it will adjust the volume according to what this is set. This is currently set to 0, so there'll be no adjustment there. And then it'll pass through any other plugins that you have here before going out to where it needs to go to, which in this case would be the stereo output that we have here. So I can illustrate this to you because this is pretty interesting when it comes to mastering, because you can control dynamics and such using some automation of the faders as well. We're going to just bring in our limiter quickly that we're going to be using, and that is Razor. So this is the final limiter that we're going to be working into. And I want to just show you what happens when we gain our track into this now. So let's boost this substantially to get quite a squashed mix here. And we're going to mute the radio, we don't need it playing double. Right, so you can see that we're squashing the crap out of this right now, but I want to do that just to illustrate something here. When I turn down the volume now of this channel, our mix is going to stay squashed. So take a listen now. Can you see that it's continuing to compress? Right, so watch what happens if we reset that now, and let's move Razor to, on the other side of this green line. Watch what happens. Still squashing here, but watch what happens when I turn the volume down now. Can you see that we're actually just not compressing now? That's because we're turning down the volume before it's going into the limiter. So I actually like to set the limiter to post fader so that this does not have any bearing on the output here, because that way we know that we can set up our limiter to be minus 0.1 like this, or minus 0.3 sometimes if you want to give yourself a little bit more leeway. We can also turn this DLC is going to be our intersample peaks. This is basically true peak limiting. We always know that we're going to be getting that output regardless of what this is set at. So we don't have to set this at 0. And this is also going to give us the opportunity now to, during a master at any given time, let's say in the break, we want to get a little bit less squashed, we can actually automate this to create moments of more dynamics and so forth, and basically control how much of the signal we're going to send into the limiter. So that's just something to bear in mind. This position is important. You see that our insert is actually turned orange in this case, which means that it's post fader, and this is going to basically be controlling the input of what's going in here. Right, let's look at a few of the other plugins that I would bring in, and these ones you could bring in beforehand. So we'll bring in our flagship frequency EQ here. And I'm going to show you a few things that I'd like to do normally with the EQ. So this is a pretty advanced EQ. There's a lot you can cover with very much the same like you would with something like Pro Q3 from FabFilter. When we looked at the dynamics briefly, we're not going to do any dynamic EQ in this case, but for starters, I sometimes like to roll the low end off, so we can change our filters here by changing the filter and going to one of these cut. We'll cut just a 12 dB over here. We can expand this at any given time by double clicking on this, which will bring up this. You can also change it here, which is the multi-view and the single view. Just gives you a little bit more information here. We're not really interested in the dynamics in any case. We'll dial this up to about 33. And we're doing a little bit of low cut. You can get steeper if you want to. You can go all the way up to 96 if you want. I would be wary of doing filters that steep in the low cuts, just because you can get phase issues. Now, if you do have phase issues, you can go for linear phase mode by activating this here. However, once again, using steep filters like this, although this will attempt to mitigate the phase in the low end, you may get stuff like pre-ringing and things like that. I'm not a massive fan of linear phase, but if you want to use it, it is there for you. I'm just going to do a 12 dB cut to just drop the lows a little bit there. Now, the other thing that I like to do is to actually make sure that we have everything mono in the low end. So what we can do is we can actually split our bands into mid and side. So you'll see we've changed our band 1 to side content, which is here, and our mid content, which is there. So we will leave our mid at 35 hertz, whatever, that's the low cut that we're doing there. We'll come over to the sides, and we're actually going to boost this all the way up to around 75. Or somewhere in that region. It's not. If you hold down shift, you can get a slightly more accurate dial there. Go to 75, 80 hertz, somewhere like that. And you'll see that this has actually created a different EQ now. We don't want to peak, we want to cut again. We'll maybe do a slightly steeper cut there for that one. So what this is doing is it's cutting out the lows on just the sides, which is going to ensure that everything below 75 that we have here is going to be in mono. If we play this back, listen carefully to this now. I'll drag this all the way up, and you'll hear that the whole mix is going to become mono in that case. There we go, mono. We'll bring back the stereo again. Right, so now we're ensuring that the kick and the bass, that there's going to be no phase issues. It's all mono and in the center. We could, of course, with our EQ, do the other things like if we wanted to maybe just spread the mids out a little bit here, you could do that in EQ by extending these sides and boosting those slightly. So we could do exactly the same that we did at the bottom end here. It works the same way. We could take the sides here and just maybe gain that up slightly. So you can do that if you want to. We'll just turn those off again and go back to stereo. So you can do some additional EQs here. I sometimes like to cut it a little bit around this sort of 160 mark, just to add a bit of separation between the bass. The rest of the track, maybe if we wanted a little bit more mids, we could just bring out a little bit of mid-range stuff there. This is more of a surgical EQ though. But yeah, you can fix any problems that you have using this here. We're also a little bit larger, so what we can do there for the master to make sure that our gain staging is correct is come over to our master channel again, and we'll just adjust the gain for this. So we'll go over to this section here, and we can the pre-gain, we'll just bring that down by 6 dB, I guess, around there. That should give us a bit more headroom now to play around with. Right, let's just bring in a few other components here. We really want to just add a little bit of tape drive to the entire signal. Just a little bit of warmth on that. We could then, again, as I said, bring in our EQ P1A, maybe just for a little bit of overall EQ. And we could do some compression on this. Now you have different options here. Once again, of course, we've got a multi-band compressor that we could look at. I don't typically turn to multi-band compressors all that much for mastering, but it is there for you if you want. We could try something a little bit more extreme as well, like Squasher, just to see what we get there. Now, Squash is a bit like OTT in that it actually does upward and downward compression. Now, this can be nice, especially for electronic music, just to kind of really fatten something up a little bit. The cool thing with this is it's got a mix dial there, so we can dial in certain amounts. So I quite like what this is doing, this mix enhancer preset. I like a little bit of that upward compression, but I think it's too much in this case, so we'll just dial the mix back down, bring in maybe just 25% of that, so it's giving us almost sort of a parallel compression effect here. And if we were going to do some additional compression on that as well, we could use something like it's the vintage compressor again. And since it's mastering, we're not looking for much more than that. We'll do pretty fast attack and bring the release down a little bit as well. Another great tool here is the maximizer. Now, this is not a limiter entirely. It's some of the processing going on in the background. It's clipping as well. Turn off Razor for a second. And we could probably move this one post as well. That is kicking in there. And let's just check out Razor once again. Maybe add in some of the maximizer again and then just dial back on the mix slightly. And there we go, I'm sort of aiming for around -3 there. And we'll set the release to auto. So the compare function that we have here as well, this is a great tool just to, the problem with limiting is that you're turning things up and listening to a loud signal and a soft signal. The loud one's always going to sound better. So the compare function, having that on, it actually bypasses the gain that's going up on this. So it's really easy for us to compare this to the unlimited version. So we play that back again. Now we can bypass the plugin. Back a little bit off, then it's squashing a little bit too much for me there. Right, cool. So we can also head over to the control room again and just bring up our inserts, and notice that supervision is still there, even though this is a new project. When you put plugins into the control room section, they stay there for you, so that when you start new projects, you always have these utilities available. And the setup that we did when we looked at supervision is still there. So let's play this back and we can take a look at all our levels and our frequencies and so on. Right, and so that is pretty much it. The last little thing we're going to do with the mastering there is to just add in a ditherer before we export. So after Razor, we're going to come down to the bottom, and now the old UV22HR plugin that you used to use for dithering in Steinberg is not, or in Steinberg's Cubase, is not available there anymore. But if you come down to the tools section, or the mastering section, my apologies, this linear ditherer that we've got here. And I think we're going to be bouncing a 24-bit master, so we can set that to 24-bit there. And that is all we need to do. Now, obviously, again, we need to bounce the extend and the radio again. I'm not going to do that in this one. You can use either method again of exporting either one at a time or doing the cycle markers again, as I showed you in the previous videos. All we need to do here for this one now is to just set up our loop points once again. We'll go to export audio mixdown. This time around we're going to a 24-bit file, and we are doing the stereo output with locators. That is going to do our current settings that we have here. Add to queue, single output, there we go. That's all sorted, and we're not going to create a new project for this one. We're just going to do nothing and insert and strip. That's all we need. Right, so that is it. We're mastering our final mix. We just hit export there right now, and we are pretty much done. And that wraps up our beginner's guide, our level 1 and level 2 for Cubase 13. Hope you guys have enjoyed this and learned something new. If you are a beginner and you finished this course, you may want to check out some of my other Cubase courses at Sonic Academy. There are plenty of them. So you can move on to any of the sort of full track walkthroughs or various other specialized courses that we have at Sonic Academy as well, using Cubase. Right, guys, I will catch you at Sonic Academy very soon. Until then, take care. See you then, and cheers.